Hello, I'm Michael Healy, and I'd like to do something a little different here. I want to comment on one of the important factors in the study of history, which is to separate our study of the past from contemporary political concerns. I mean, you can't fully do that. Your own goals and impulses will always become part of your study of history. One factor, but you should try to minimize its influence so as to keep you from distorting the past. Let me give you, as an example, Joan of Arc. Specifically, for perfectly understandable reasons, many feminists look up to Joan of Arc as a hero, one of history's strong women, dressed in men's clothing, led soldiers on the battlefield. People today could look back on her and think in many ways she's ahead of her time. And they might see her as a model, an inspiration. But if Joan could travel forward in time, would she be able to see herself in modern feminism? Yes and no. I mean, certainly she would sympathize with the idea that a woman should be able to wear men's clothing and lead men in battle if that is her mission. But at a more fundamental level, she simply could not agree with all of the positions taken by the feminist movement, because doing so would force her it would be a real crisis of faith for her if she accepted some of the principles of modern feminism, not just in terms of her Roman Catholic faith, but in terms of her loyalty to King Charles, even. Let me explain. First of all, we can see in the records of Joan's life, and particularly the trial records at the end of her life when she was unjustly put to death, that even though that throughout her life she was a faithful Roman Catholic, and even when she was being unjustly condemned to death by certain prelates, she still was faithful to the Catholic Church and even appealed to the Pope of Rome over the heads of the unjust clerics who were condemning her. They denied her appeal, which is, I think, probably one of the reasons that her condemnation ended up getting overturned 20 or 30 years later. But that's not my main point. My point is, she was always a faithful Roman Catholic, regardless of the circumstances, even when certain unjust churchmen turned against her because of political prejudices. But many modern feminists not only reject the Catholic Church, but seem to see it as their primary enemy. On that point, Joan could never side with them. It would destroy in a very important part of her very identity. She was a woman who had visions of Catholic angels and saints and believed she was on a mission from the God of the Catholic Church, and to remain faithful to the Catholic Church even when certain churchmen betrayed her. But the second point is what I would really want to focus on here, and that is that if Joan were to accept all of the principles of modern feminism, and this, I think, is a principle that holds good across all of the different waves of feminism, that if Joan were to hold to this principle, namely that a woman should be able to serve in any capacity in which a man can serve, she would have to stop supporting King Charles VII and hand victory in the 100 Years' War over to the English. Now, to understand why, we have to remind ourselves of the sequence of events that started the 100 Years' War. First, in 1317, King Philip V of France established the principle that a woman could not inherit the throne of France. This came back to bite the French monarchy in 1328 when King Charles IV of France died with 2 daughters and a sister, but no male heir. King Edward III of England then said, look, I'm the son of Charles IV's sister, and I'm therefore his nephew and his closest male relative. Therefore, Edward III argued, as the closest male relative, I should inherit the throne, given that a woman cannot inherit the throne of France. But the French nobles disagreed. They said, no, Edward, if your mother cannot inherit the French throne herself, then she cannot transmit to you a claim that she does not have. And obviously Edward refused to accept this, and that was the start of the 100 Years' War. I mean, I'm oversimplifying a little, but that's essentially what started the 100 Years' War. So this means that Charles VII's claim to the throne is based on the principle that a woman cannot inherit the throne of France and cannot transmit a claim to the throne to one of her male relatives either. This principle is what started the whole 100 Years' War and was the basis for the French position that the English kings were not rightful heirs to the French throne. But if it was possible for a woman to inherit a claim to the French throne or to transmit a claim to the French throne to her son, Edward III's claim would have been just, and the kings of England would have had a just claim to the French throne. Obviously, the feminist principle that a woman should be able to serve in any capacity in which a man can serve would actually justify England's position in the 100 Years' War, rather than France's, which would mean Joan, for ideological reasons, would have to reject certain elements of feminist ideology, which to our mind might seem strange, but to her, in the struggles of her day, it would have been necessary for her to deny that a woman could be the heir to the French throne, and it would have been necessary for her to deny that a woman could transmit a claim to the French throne. Certainly Joan would not have agreed that women are inferior to men, but she would have had to have accepted the principle that a woman cannot rule France in order to justify her support for King Charles VII. And if she could never have done that, if there was anything Joan was passionate about, it was driving the English out of France. And of everyone in Charles VII's court, she was the one who was most often raring to go, saying, come on, send me out to fight, send me out to fight. I want to fight the English. That was Joan. And she could never have accepted a principle that justified the English king's claim to the throne of France. So no, Joan could never have been a feminist. Thank you, and if you like my channel, please subscribe.